Class. Today I'm going to teach you about,
Evening,
yes. Before we start the lesson, I would like to take roll call. We start with Eric Kamande,
present,
Ezra Tanui, Alex Kosgei,
present,
Betty Cheres,
Present.
and I can see Josephat is also present. Damaklin, okay, thank you. Today we are going to study about practical chemistry on lab safety regulations. So by the end of the lesson, we are supposed to mention some of the safety precautions in the lab and also discuss the format of writing a lab report. So first of all, uh, safety in the lab, we are supposed to observe safety in the lab. So one of them is we should know that any science project or individual planned experiment must be approved by the teacher. You cannot go and tell yourself that you cannot start having a practical by you plan a practical and do it yourself. And then you should clean up any non-hazardous spills on the floor or workspace immediately when it gets spilled. This is to avoid contamination and also to avoid also the spillage to affect yourself. Then we should always wear our protective equipment anytime we are in the lab, and we should always wear the appropriate and the required protection where okay, to cover the part of the body that is needed to be covered. And then we should also perform our experiments in the fume chambers, especially those that contain chemicals that produce fumes that are harmful to our bodies. And then when we are testing for odor, when we are testing for odor, when we are testing for odor, any smell from a chemical, we should just wave our hands above the container containing the chemical, and we should not just put our nose directly on top of that container, because we may end up smelling whatever the chemical is, and it will harm our health. It may also, during the process, any accident can also occur, and in the process you can spill the chemical on your face. Then we should never eat or drink anything in the laboratory. That is a rule that is strictly to be followed, because it is the laboratory is highly contaminated. So then we should never pipette with our mouths. We should always use a pipette filler to avoid ingesting any harmful chemicals. Then if you have an open wound, you should not perform any experiment at all, but you should always inform your trainer on the same before. You should always inform your trainer that you have an open wound, so that you can be allowed not to perform the experiment. But if it is not that huge, you can always wear protective equipment over it, and especially if you're not performing an experiment that requires that that uses harmful chemicals. Then you should always check labels on the equipments, to read on the equipments and read them carefully, and make sure that you understand what is required. There are also normally symbols that are attached. When you see a red symbol, it means this is the different of them. Yellow, red, they all mean flammability. Maybe green for biotic, hazardous. So you should always read the chemicals, the labels on the equipment, and make sure that you understand them carefully. And in case the label get dropped off from the equipment, you should always write a sticky note that, and you should, for every time you should include everything that is, you should always admit, not admit, you should read, you should include those labels. And whenever you write that, the whatever instructions that were previously on the chemical, write everything and stick on the part of the equipment that was previously uh, with the label. Then you should never pour reagents back into the bottle. If the reagent that you used was more than what you required, just pour the rest. But you should always make sure that you just use enough, because you are not supposed to pour back the reagent back to the bottle, because you'll contaminate the rest of the reagents, the rest of the chemical. uh, then when diluting acid, you should pour acid into water, but never the reverse. This is to avoid the buildup of heat and cause that will cause splashing. And the reaction may be too much, and your apparatus may break, and you'll end up burning yourself with the chemical. So, and then in case of any accidents that occur, you should always report to the teacher or the trainer immediately, no matter how small or minor you feel the accident is. Because according to you, you may view it as small, but in real sense, it is the accident is more fatal, and it may be more harmful than you think. Because most of these chemicals that we normally use in the laboratory, most of trainees don't actually know, don't have the right knowledge on how harmful they can be. So we tend to ignore. So when you see a chemical has spilled on the table, you just wipe off without being careful on what you're doing, and you end up harming yourself. We may not feel the effects of these chemicals right now, but later on in life, you will realize you are actually supposed to take better care of yourself. And then you should not leave any ongoing experiment unattended. You should make sure that when you start an experiment, take it to completion, and when you complete, you wash your apparatus and reagents. The ones that remained, you pour them, and the ones that reacted, you also pour them, and you wash all your apparatus carefully and take them back to where they are supposed to belong. So, and then one rule that we should all know is that when you enter into the lab, the first thing you need to know is to allocate. You should locate where safety equipments are. Examples is fire extinguishers. In case of any accident, we'll obviously run to the fire extinguisher and put out the fire. Also the fire blankets, and even the exit doors. That is the first thing that you're supposed to know when you enter into the lab. You should never run or play in the laboratory. That one we know. And then we should always wear gloves when using hazardous or toxic chemicals. Apart from that, we know that when you perform an experiment, definitely you're supposed to write a report. Any experiment that you perform in the laboratory, you're supposed to write a report, and that takes back us to the second objective of our experiment. So when writing our lab report, you normally have a format that you have to follow, and it is as it is indicated below. We should all you start with a title page, and then introduction, and then experimental section, and then results and discussions, and then the references. I think this one is what we all know. We've done it before. We've been writing reports before, and we'll continue writing the reports before. So we should This is something that we all know. So in case you need any clarification here, you can ask. And before I come to the end of my presentation, anyone who has a question? Anyone with a question? Yes, Josephat.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay,
Okay,
my
my
question
question
is
is
concerning now
concerning now
these
these
references. Is
references.
there
Is there
because
because we usually have various references. For example, you have MLA, APA, Harvard. So which are you supposed to use specifically, or you can use any?
Thank you for your question, Josephat. When writing a report, we normally use APA style, and I hope you know how to use APA style. So that is what you're supposed to use.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Welcome. And is there anyone with a question? Or Okonda, you lowered your hand. So if there is no question, we are coming to the end of our presentation. Before we end, I want to summarize on what we've learned today. We've learned about the safety regulations in the laboratory, and we've also learned about uh, format of writing a report. Anyone who wants to tell us any safety regulation in the lab? Yes, Eric?
Should not eat or drink anything in the lab.
Thank you. You should not eat or drink anything in the lab. Good work. Anyone else? Yes, Josephat?
Okay,
I've
I've
also
also
learned that
learned
we are
that
not supposed to
we are not supposed to eat or taste anything while in the lab.
Okay, yes. Basically, that's what we've learned. And I want to give you an assignment. I want you to name all the safety equipments that are found in the laboratory. I want you to write you write a report on the same. Yes, Damaklin, I've seen that you should not leave any experiment unattended. Thank you. And Josephat, do you have any question because you're still raising your hand?
Okay, sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
Okay, we've come to the end of our presentation. Thank you for coming to my class. Have a good night.
You too.